Good morning again, everybody. We will get started. I'll call the Regional District of Okanagan-Smokemean regular board meeting to order. A reminder that this is an opportunity for anybody to pull anything off the consent agenda that they wanted to have discussed. Looking to see if there's any hands for anything there. Seeing no hands, I will look for a motion to approve the agenda. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to the consent agenda corporate issues. Looking for a motion to approve. Moved, seconded, thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to consent agenda development services. Looking for a motion there. Moved, seconded, thank you. All in favor? Again, thank you. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. That takes us to item B1 in development services, a watercourse development permit application in electoral area E, CAO.
This was the tram that the board approved back in June, Mr. Chair. So this is a property that's adjacent to Okanagan Lake, but at an elevated a level, and they want to use a tram to go down to the lake instead of having to develop a trail that would be very intrusive getting down to the lakeside. So because it does go into that streamside protection and enhancement area, which is RAR consideration, they required a qualified environmental professional report that under the new RAR legislation requires provincial approval. Unless the board approved an expedited application process, which you did back on June 2nd. So they have now provided the qualified environmental professional report that points out mitigation activities and the reduced risk of environmental damage by allowing the tram to proceed. So now it's up to the board to award this watercourse development permit, and we are recommending that that be approved, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Director Kazakovich for direction.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to move the administrative recommendation.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion on this? Seeing no hands. This is a rural vote. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to B2, a development variance permit for electoral area E, CAO.
This is an application for the development variance permit to allow for the construction of a single family dwelling. It requires a front yard setback from 7.5 meters to 1.5 meters. And we don't see any adverse impact on the neighborhood of doing that, Mr. Chair. So we're recommending that this application be approved.
Okay, again, I'll go to Director Kazakovich.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to move the administrative recommendation and I can speak to it.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Thank you. Go ahead, Director Kazakovich.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to address some of the points. I know there were some letters against it, as well as at least one letter for this application. In some of the letters, there has been mention of an issue with trees that were cut down. That's not relevant to this, in my opinion. That was something that came up starting last year. There was an issue with trees in the power lines for Fortis, or with the property owner in Fortis. So there was a little bit of finger pointing. Who was responsible for dealing with the trees? Was it Fortis? Was it Ministry of Transportation because the trees were on their road right away? Was it the RDOS because the RDOS has a permit to keep that area clean and accessible to the public, or was it the property owner? So that went back and forth and back and forth. Eventually it was dealt with, so that there was not something done there that was not allowed or appropriate. So I just wanted to address that because that's in the letters. Also, I wanted to mention that This is a road end, so it's a road end to the lake. So there is not impact on access to the lake for the public. So this is not going to impede that road lake access. It can't. So I don't think we're going to have issues with traffic movement because it is a road end to the lake. So we're not dealing with site issues on this. I know the immediate neighbor to the right or to the east of this property, if you're facing it from the lake, has written in favor. The neighbor to the west on the other side of the road end did not see anything from that neighbor. Some other neighbors around the corner had some concerns with sight lines, with their view, and as well as access to the lake. So once again, that's not going to be impeded. And one of the key things here, I think, is that this is allowing for protection of the SPIA, the streamside protection and enhancement area, which is one of the main things the OCP encourages. So based on these points, I am in support of this moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, is there any further discussion on this? Seeing no hands, again, this is a rural vote. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to B3, another development variance, this time in electoral area I, CAO.
This is the 3 small lots subdivision in Cleveland, Mr. Chair. And they're asking for a series of setback reductions in order to fit their a residence on the 3 lots. So I mean, nobody likes this. It would be too much building on too little land. But the problem is this was a subdivision that was approved in 1910. And they are 3 legal lots. We have since, through the zoning bylaw, put restrictions on these lots. We've said you have to have certain setbacks around the property so you don't encroach too close to other developments. But your minimum width of your building must be 5 meters. There isn't 5 meters left on those 3 lots in order to build a dwelling. It is unlikely that the law would allow us to put zoning restrictions that would make somebody's property worthless, meaning they can't build on it. So what we would recommend, Mr. Chair, is that we allow the variances, keep the 5 meter minimum, and allow this development to proceed.
Okay, I will go to Director Monteith for direction on this.
Thank you. And I'd like to make the alternate recommendation, please.
Okay, so that is a motion to deny.
Correct.
Is there a seconder for that? Seconded. All right. Motion's on the floor. Discussion on this?
Applicant?
Oh, yes. Good idea. Thanks for reminding me. With the motion to deny, that does give the applicant the opportunity to address the board. Is the applicant online? They could raise their hand or indicate in some fashion.
If you open up the attendees, I can see.
If we can open the attendee list. I'll view it, or opening it here on.
I think it's. I don't see it. I don't see any hands.
No, I'm not seeing any hands. So, oh, there's ODC has some hands up. What is that?
That would be them.
Okay. Can we bring them in? Can you hear us?
Can you hear us?
There you are. Hello. Can you hear us?
Yes, we can. Thank you, directors, for allowing us to chime in here. My name is Jeff Gagno, and with me is Mike Neild, and we are the owners of ODC. And
Okay.
and also we are here representing our clients. Yes, so what we're proposing here is a variance to allow for 3 small houses to be built on existing lots. And when speaking with the staff of the regional district, before us 2 options. One would either vary the setbacks to satisfy the 5-meter width rule, or to vary the 5-meter width rule itself. And with discussions with the staff and the client, we chose to go with the variance to the side setbacks, which is a reduction of essentially 2 feet. What we're asking for 2 of the lots, and then slightly more for the corner lot.
Appreciate that info. Is there any questions from the board on to the applicant? Director Obrook, go ahead.
Yes, thank you to the chair, and thank you to the applicant for being here. When I look at this, the question that popped in my head, did you consider, and do you know if it's possible, when I look at this, I think of, something like a townhouse setup where you could have 3 dwellings, 1 on each title, with a party wall, so you could put onto these 3 titles what would in essence be 1 building, 3 separate titles. And I'm just curious if you've thought about it, what the reaction is to that idea. And later I can ask staff the same question, but I sure appreciate the CAO's comment that you don't want to render anybody's land of no value. And this is a way that the land could have real value and provide good potential housing in the community. This is done elsewhere in Canada. It's not unique to this neighborhood. But I'm just wondering what the thought is on that, if there was any. Thank you.
Can you care to respond?
Yes, thank you for that. We did talk about a few different options for the land. We did talk about consolidating the lots into 1. We talked about possibly consolidating the idea of having a townhouse spanning across the existing parcels is not an idea that we've talked to the client about yet. The concept for the 3 individual houses was 1 house would be for the owners, and the 2 remaining houses would be for their children, allowing for 3 individual dwellings. We have looked at lot coverage, and with 3 individual houses, we're covering about 28, almost 2,900 square feet of the land, versus the max allowed if we do consolidate into 1 large building, which could be over 3,600 square feet. So we know we can have a larger structure there, or even 1 or possibly 2, but we're just following what the client was asking for 3 separate small dwellings. But this is an option that we would definitely bring back to the client if it gets to that point.
All right, thank you. A follow-up, Director Obrook?
Yeah, just a follow-up comment. You don't have to make the building bigger. You can make the building square foot identical with a common party wall on the property line. So you certainly can stay within site limits for square areas, and variances are possible, obviously. I'm just curious because I don't understand all the reasons for and against this one. I just want to listen and learn. So thank you so much for your answer to that question. It helps me. Thank you.
Is there any other questions for the applicant from the board? I'm seeing no hands, so thank you for the brief presentation to the board. We'll put it back to the board.
Director Roberts has his hand up, Mr. Chair.
Am I missing you, Director Roberts? Go ahead, please, go ahead.
Sorry, I was probably lost in the shrubbery there. To the chair.
Go ahead.
My question is in regards to this format. how are you going to meet the necessary needs around septic? And, how does that affect this type of development? So it's a question in regards to septic. Thank you.
Hi there,
You
this is
care to
Mike.
respond?
Yes, we have looked at the septic and we have got an opinion of a professional RWOP on it. So we've looked at areas and it is possible to put a septic in there. It would be a type 2 system that would have a larger holding tank and a smaller septic field. And we would separate them and put the holding tank possibly in the front and the septic field up in the back, or vice versa, so that they would be, it would be amenable to the site, I think, from initial comments from our RWOP. Just a matter of doing, of course, test holes there and so forth. But she has done several septic systems down on Ponderosa, and she's fairly confident that we could make it work with the type 2 system where we separate the septic and the holding tanks from the front and back and either pump up to the back or let it drain front one or the other. We wouldn't know that until we test holes, and it is possible.
And to follow up with that, that is one of the setback variances we are requesting to push the buildings into the rear setback from 7.5 to 6 meters. This would allow more septic area in the front, and also it'll allow a little more sight lines for the neighbors for the view.
And we are allowed to, the system that she suggested to, we are allowed to have a driveway over top of the holding tanks, and it would be a green type driveway. We could have, those little separators that kind of up a little bit, then the grass would be in between. So that way, it still just look like, a normal lawn, but there would be a holding tank under it.
Okay. I think that answers that. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Double checking the screen. If I'm missing anybody, holler. Seeing none, thank you for the presentation, and it will come back to the board here for a decision on the motion before us. Go to Director Monteith. Go ahead.
To the chair, I just want to explain the community feedback, the comments, the concerns that I am definitely hearing. So just as CEO mentioned, the lots were created in 1910. They were very small lots, very small homes. That's when Culleton was intended to be a city. That's when Culleton was going to become something. We are a rural community. There is no other development in Culleton with this density. So the community does not support it. We do not want to have, especially on the lakefront, the community does not want to have townhouses. They do not want to have this density. Realize this lot, they want to develop 3 homes. Yes, it's 3 legal lots. I understand that. But it's the size of this boardroom. 3 homes here. Like, think about this. No community in the RDOS wants to have that density. So directors know this could be in your community. It happens to be in mine. It's really unfortunate that the regional district did not catch this. We should not be having these small lots in small rural communities. Okanagan Water Basin Board does not support density, especially along the waterfront. They want to see us make sure that we're not subdividing lots to create this exact problem in communities that do not have community sewer. The driveways, 3 driveways on a corner lot, that makes no sense. It is a disaster. Those roads are narrow, rural community roads. You do not have room to park. They're not going to have room for parking for guests. It's going to be a disaster to the community. It's not in the best interest of the community to have 3 tiny homes. Our community wants to have year-round housing, not vacation rentals. I do feel the design, rooftop, patio, it's intended to be a vacation. And that's not what the community wants. The community is asking for us to review our policies to make sure that we're accommodating long-term housing. If a building was to be built like this in the city of Penticton, Oliver, or Suias, I think the community would also say that to you, that they don't want to have density in rural offset neighborhoods. So it's unfortunate that this wasn't caught sooner. Other properties in Culleton are in the exact same position. of having these narrow lots. And the community does want to see this reviewed. And in fact, this board agreed for us to have a community review of Area I, specifically Culloden, to address this. And this is one application that came forward while we'd already agreed to have that put on strategic planning for 2023. So with all of those reasons, I can't support building more density on a community lot. That property has one home on it. Area I allows secondary dwellings. They could definitely have two homes as now. They have a garage that has a bathtub and a toilet in there. So it's already operating exactly what the community is. The community does not have townhouses and this density. So Culloden doesn't support it. For that reason, I do not.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on this? Not seeing any hands. Director Coyne Senior, go ahead, please.
I guess this one's kind of for Bill. So if we say no, and that makes those people's lots basically useless, does that put us at any sort of, when it goes to the province, is that going to put us at any sort of risk financially?
Well,
CAO?
I'm not sure why it would go to the province. It would be up to the property owners to seek damages, really, from the regional district. In an incorporated community, typically where they, all good reasons that Director Monteith pointed out, but typically a municipality would purchase those properties if they didn't want to see them developed. Whereas in our case, we don't have a service or funding for that. Some municipalities may purchase them and make them a park or some other way to benefit the community, but that's not feasible for us.
Because we have a very similar scenario in Colmont and Tilney where we have 25-foot lots, and so far nobody has. One guy started the development on it, and it hasn't been completed, but it's out there and it could very well happen. So I was just curious. Thank you.
I would also point out they do have another option, and that would be to vary the size of the building from 5-meter width to a smaller one, which would come back to the board in the future. Or there could be other options as well. So, Director Monteith, you had a hand up?
To the chair, I just want to point out that the property currently has a home on it and it has a garage. So one home was able to be built across 3 lots. So the community understands there will be a home on there. There could be a secondary dwelling. It is the 3 tiny homes in that tiny density, and just having 3 separate driveways. It's too much for the community.
Okay, I've got a hand from Director McCordoff, and then I'll go to Director Obrook.
Thank you very much. I certainly read all the comments on this with a lot of interest, and I totally agree. It looks to me like the density is too much for sure. I'm assuming it's quite close to the lake, and that concerns me about runoff and water and sewer getting into the lake. But what I'm not sure about is if there are 3 separate lots, does that mean that there would be 3 separate sanitary sewer, not sewer, but you know what? I'm sorry. Yeah, septic. I'm on septic. So, and I know how confusing that it can be, and I'm on a fairly large lot. So would that, and I should have asked before, would that mean that there would need to be 3 septic solutions, for 1 for each home? Because I don't think you can combine them into one, can you? That was the question. Thank you.
I'm not sure on that, but my understanding of what the applicant had said was they were going to do a type 2 system, which would probably combine them into one, a holding tank for each home pumping into one septic system. Any other questions? I see the hand from the applicant, but it's already back to the board. So unless I'm absolutely wrong on that suggestion or my interpretation of what the applicant said. Seeing no further hands from the board, Director Olbrich, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much to the chair, and I don't have any difficulty supporting Director Monteith for the reasons that she has stated. I just wanted to add that this property, we're talking two suites, so it's a 50% lift to go to 3. I can say in my community, we've got lots of interest in tiny homes and so on, so we're not the same. Other communities are different. But I wanted to make a suggestion, if the applicant is listening through their agent. One of the things that bothers me about the current structure, I have a pet peeve against putting individual dwellings on 3 titles. I have a lot of trouble with that. I understand why an owner doesn't want to consolidate because they want to keep open this option that Director Monteith says should have been closed long ago. With respect, the RDOS didn't exist 100 years ago, and the RDOS doesn't have subdivision approval authority in any event at the current moment. All that aside, one of the thoughts going forward, a good neighbor idea, is if you're going to develop this property, maybe you consolidate the 3 titles into one, build new, maybe have a legal secondary suite, and maybe the neighbors all are happy instead of hearing this kind of discord, because you gotta coexist in community and be respectful to each other. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Right. Any other discussion on this? Seeing no hands from the board, again, this is a rural vote. I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Director Coyne, Bush, and Knodel opposed, but the motion does carry. All right, down to B4, noise control bylaw, CAO.
So this is a consolidation of a number of individual electoral area zoning, noise bylaws, Mr. Chair, excluding H. We're going to deal with H shortly. They have their own noise control bylaw, but we'll deal with that separately. So there are 2 bylaws that we have to change in this process, Mr. Chair, and you'll have to deal with them separately. One is the first, second, third reading of the proposed consolidated noise bylaw. And this is for areas C, D, E, F, and I. And then the second one would be the amendment to the bylaw notice enforcement bylaw for 3 readings, but that would be a corporate vote.
Okay, looking for direction on this one. Someone willing to make that move or motion? Director Knodel, I'm assuming you're moving it. Thank you. A seconder? Thank you. Any discussion on this? Director Kazakovich, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm sorry if I missed this in the report, but I know that we've added decibel readings. And I'm just wondering, because I was thinking of Area D, we talked about the Penticton Speedway, and what happens if there's a complaint on speedway noise? Where do they take the decibel reading from? Is it from the homeowner's house? Is it from outside their house, inside their house? Is it at the outside the speedway property from the road? I'm just wondering how that is going to be done and what is the consistent approach when those complaints come in, even on something else. If a homeowner complains about noise they hear from a business down the road, will the reading be taken from their home or from the side of the road of the business? Thank you.
Okay, I see Mr. Garish online. Can you answer that for us?
Through the chair, I can give it a stab. I'm trying to recall. I had prepared that slide for the board's consideration at the last P&D committee, and it attempted to visually show how the bylaw sets out that sound measurements will be taken. And I recall there was two options to do it. One involved standing at the property line of the person who has registered the complaint about the noise in order to record the decibel level. And the other option involved, I believe it was being within 6 meters of the property from which the noise is emanating in order to take the measurement. So there's those two ways of doing it. But as I was trying to convey to the board last time, I mean, this is a whole new approach for us. So which one of those is going to be the more common used way to register decibels? We don't know at this point, and won't know until we start actually actively measuring out in the various communities. So I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you for that. Anything further, Director Kozakovich?
Yes, thank you. Well, I think that's going to need to be determined because it could be quite problematic for some businesses to measure just, you know, from sort of 6 meters from their property line versus the complaining household. I know out in Naramata, I'm a long ways from the Penticton Speedway, but on certain evenings, based on the wind, I can actually hear the Speedway from my deck. Doesn't bother me, but I can hear it. So I think we need to make sure that that is sorted out and it's a consistent approach with all complaints coming in. Thank you.
All right. And from Director Knodel, go ahead, please.
This is a bylaw that's being basically put together from other areas that already do this. So I'm sure these questions have come up, and I'm just wondering if Mr. Garish has any insight into how, you know, neighboring industrial and neighboring existing noise creating businesses are handled. There must be a mechanism for these other areas that have done this to either grandfather or to allow certain businesses that are not constantly in breach of the noise limit.
Mr. Garish?
Through the chair, so we did do some research on this, which we presented at the last P&D, and so there is no grandfathering provisions in relation to noise bylaws. And I think we committed at the P&D that we would probably most likely return to the board in 12 months' time to give you an indication of how the bylaw is working, some of the challenges that we've seen, particularly in relation to some of those uses that may cause higher noise levels, such as the speedway and the aggregate production operations. And if our measurements, or sorry, if our decibel levels are maybe not appropriate or causing problems, either because they're too high or too low, that we would highlight that for the board and seek further direction at that time.
Okay. Follow up, Director Knodel?
Yes, please. Just for clarity, I would like to know how we would handle them in the interim. I wouldn't want to see any business being penalized until we've, you know, established a criteria for this. So what would be the interim handling until we came back and viewed the results of the measurements, so to speak?
Again, I'll go to Mr. Garish.
Well, I suspect that we will continue to operate as we have been in relation to noise complaints and respond to them as they come in. But whereas we were relying on the hearing of the bylaw enforcement officer previously, we'll now be relying on the decibel measurement equipment. And if a use is exceeding the allowable levels, then I suspect, as per what I'm assuming to be our current practices, we would be issuing tickets. But you know, as I've said, if we see at a staff level that you know, our levels have been maybe set too high or too low, and if it's becoming a continuous problem, you know, I say 12 months reporting back to the board, but I mean, we could easily come back sooner if we see an urgent problem with the new bylaw. So I hope that helps.
Okay, I'll go to CAO.
So this is one of those regulatory bylaws where somebody's going to be unhappy. The person complaining about noise would be happy that we're enforcing. Those that are the subject of the complaint are not going to be happy. Our job, once the board sets rules, is to go out and enforce them. And yes, I think Mr. Garris has mentioned many times throughout this will be a trial and error. The decimeters are new for us. So there's going to be some adjustment, I think, as we go along. And we would have to come back to the board if we thought that it was too onerous or not onerous enough. In the meantime, we would enforce.
Okay, I've got several hands. Did you have a follow-up, Director Knodel, or?
Yeah, I just like to know if we could go in the direction of being more lax and work down rather than start at the highest level and work up. It seems like we're starting quite low in the decibel readings by comparison to other areas. So I'm thinking we might be moving in the wrong direction. You know, starting in the wrong position, let's put it that way. So possibly we should be looking in the other way. Thank you.
I would just remind everybody that we had changed the decibel meter reading allowable for the speedway, though. It's not what the standard was. We've raised that. I'll go to Director Gettens.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to just acknowledge what Chris again said about this being a trial, and I think we do have to start somewhere. I think bringing in the decibels will definitely remove some of the subjectivity of our existing bylaw, and I think that will be very helpful. So thank you for that. I'm on board with giving the trial. I'm in an area too where we've got an industry that is really hard on the citizens that live nearby, but we got to figure out a way to make this work so it's reasonable moving forward, and I think that's what we're aiming for. My question is, and again, I do apologize if I missed this somewhere, but we are only relying on decibel readings from staff. We're not permitting decibel readings from an app or anything like that from citizens. Can I just get a bit of clarity on that, please? Thank you.
Mr. Garish?
Through the chair, that's correct. The readings would have to be taken by our staff, the bylaw officers. The concern with people relying on apps is it's difficult for us. It would be difficult for us to know what they're actually measuring and where the sound is coming from when they send us their readings. So I think it's imperative for us to use our staff in those situations.
Okay, follow-up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So with the decibel readings, I think I understand they're costly, but do we have enough for each bylaw officer? My concern is that I think it's hard to get out there when the noise is always happening right when it's happening. So I just want to know how that works. So who has the decibels readers or whatever they're called, and how many do we have them? And like, are we going to actually be able to put that part through, recognizing it's a trial? Thanks.
Mr. Garish?
Thanks to the chair. I think the estimates that we put to the board earlier in this discussion, we envisioned that the costs of getting up and running with a decibel version of this bylaw are going to be around $10,000. And primarily that was attributable to purchasing what we would consider higher end readers. We anticipate that we would need 3 of them at a minimum in order that the bylaw enforcement officers that we contract with have them. We're looking into having training opportunities, and then also some of the costs would be required for ensuring calibration can happen and annual maintenance of the readers. So that's kind of at least our starting point in terms of like the equipment and the training and calibration, et cetera. So.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that.
Thank you. Director Monteith?
To the chair, I just want to share maybe a live experience in Cleveland right now. So I've been working with Linden Gardens. They have a event venues on weekend. They have a lot of weddings, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, pretty busy. So the neighbors have been concerned about noise. You know, it's every weekend, all summer long, from May to September. So the property owner is in favor of this bylaw. The property owner wants to see some sort of exactly this, just decibel readers, so that he understands what his limits are on his property, all those good things. So the neighbors in the community have been following this. And just to give you an example, so a property owner that's 290 meters away, of course, uses an app on their phone. They come up with a decibel reader of a 91, whatever it is. The neighbor 3 doors down does the exact same thing and comes up with 61. So it's not only just about proximity, it's also about the topography, because things are so different, and valleys, and whether you're close to the lake, whether you're further away, like, so there's lots of, I guess, factors. I hate to see people have an unreal expectation of the reader being very hard fast to different areas. So I guess I'm also looking for that clarity to make sure that we're not putting expectations to residents that aren't going to be met.
Okay. I'm not sure there can be a response to that, but I'll go to Director Kazakovich. I see a hand from you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to mention that, I think the board has to be very cautious on this and do what's realistic and what's fair. If we use the Speedway example, they've been in business, I believe, 50 years. So you've got people who have moved in near them knowing that there's a Speedway there. If this violates the decibel reading, are we going to be issuing a fine every single day? To what end? Trying to shut down a business that's been existing 50 years? It doesn't make sense. Are we then going to increase the decibel reading so they're not getting caught in it? And if that's the case, why have it? Or why not have exempt properties then that have been existing, essentially grandfathering them? I think it's really tough. It's a tough thing to do. I mean, we have boats on the lake that are super noisy, but we're not going to be applying this to, having bylaw go after boats. I mean, the noise that travels up the hillside from some of the boats is extreme. So it's not that I'm against having a decibel reading at all, but I think it's going to be really challenging to apply this and not end up with a problem or possibly end up in court because of how it's being applied against a business. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the comments. Director Knodel.
Yeah, it's like you say, this has been done in other areas, so there has to be a solution to this. But also, to that end, we have people that live beside airports, which are definitely in excess of it, and there's exceptions made in that circle. So somehow we've got to come to an understanding how this is going to work. Like Director Monteith, my residents are well in favor of this because it sets quantitative values that they have to be able to reach a goal, and there's the goal, and it can be measured. One thing we've already found out is that the decibel meter app that comes on cell phones is not in any way acceptable as a measurement tool. Side by side, they can vary 20, 30 decibel easily. So that's not a good measurement tool. Decibel meters on a whole are fairly cheap off Amazon and are considerably more accurate if someone wanted to get into that game. And like Mr. Garish has said, as government, we tend to look at a much higher end tool when we're doing this kind of thing. Thank you.
Okay. Director Obrick.
Yes, thank you to the chair, and I want to say thank you to Director Kazakovich for raising the Speedway issue. It is in my electoral area D, and I really agree with her concerns about harm to that long-standing use. And I do have a couple questions. My awareness of the issue goes back a number of years. Community complaint, former owner telling me he put loud motorcycle events on purpose at a time to offend, to get a bargaining chip with community on concession. I mean, so there's the other side of it, is if you don't have some kind of a balance that's reasonable, it can also, with a bad faith operator, give you another kind of a problem. And so that has to be balanced. The current operators, I think, are incredibly done a great job. So I'm not concerned of any fear of something like that happening. But by way of background, I just want to share there's a lot of concern in this community about that one noise, which they can hear in Naramata, I guess. So when you look at what's the right balance, my question for staff is, what comfort can you give Director Kozakovich and myself that we've got the balance right on Speedway? That's what I'm looking for. What is the right balance? Thank you.
I'll go to Mr. Garish on that. That one's going to be a tough one. But
And through the chair, I do appreciate that introduction or that transition. It is a tough one. We at a staff level are concerned about how the bylaw will relate to the Speedway. We did try to gauge how other communities in the province with similar type of automobile racing tracks in their jurisdictions who have noise bylaws dealt with them. And I mean, to be honest, it was a wide range of different approaches. You know, some don't even have the decibels in their noise bylaws. We did find a couple that did, but their decibel allowances ranged from, as I recall, between 65 to 95. So I believe in the bylaw, we went with the higher end for the benefit of the Speedway and went with 95 as the allowance. So we're hopeful that allows them to operate within reasonable, I guess, sound limits or levels that you would expect for vehicle racing. But as I've been trying to emphasize, if it's not, if it's in some way, we will come back to the board and seek direction on how you wish to deal with it.
okay, Director Obrick, follow up.
Yeah, thank you very much. And arising in follow-up, a thought triggered as Mr. Garish spoke, and thank you, Mr. Garish, for the answer. I appreciate it a lot. Did any staff talk to the operators of Speedway on this issue directly?
Mr. Garish?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. Any further discussion on this? This is Director Bush. Go ahead.
Yeah, so apparently it doesn't seem like there's been any testing on the Speedway or on wherever the construction site is that people are concerned about. And I just can't see businesses operating during regular hours for decimal readings. I can't vote for this, even though it doesn't affect me, but thank you.
All right. Any further discussion? Director Knodel.
I think Director Bush just hit it right on the nose. And probably need some testing to establish where we should be for these decibel readings. So possibly we should be looking at that first and then considering how we move ahead. Thank you.
Okay, Director Obrick.
Yes, thank you to the chair, and I agree with both Director Bush and Director Knodel. I hesitate to jump too quickly when a pause to perhaps consult an operation like Speedway, do some testing. I fear that we don't lose a lot by doing those things, and we risk something if we don't. So I agree with Director Bush and Director Knodel. I'd be willing to make a motion to postpone this to permit that kind of further testing and consult to give the board better information. I certainly, again, thank Director Kozakovich for bringing this forth. I really appreciate all the discussion. This is my electoral area when we're talking about Speedway, so I'm the one who's going to be impacted the most. I'm sure no other directors have people calling them, yelling at them, and swearing at them, but I've had that happen to me on occasion. And so it really matters to me that we proceed carefully. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm hearing you making a motion to postpone until such testing is done.
Yes, and I'd look to staff for advice on how long that would be reasonable, but I would suggest, it sounds to me like a little more comfort on that. And I personally think the operators might have relevant input into this if they were consulted. If it was my business, I might be offended if nobody asked me. Such a big change.
So you're moving it. I see
yes,
a
please.
Seconder. Thank you. So on postponement, I will call the question. All those in favor, and this is corporate when it becomes postponed. Can I just clarify with Ms. Molden?
So because it's a motion on the floor to postpone, it would be a corporate.
Okay, thank you. So it is a corporate vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Long discussion on that one. So down to public notice bylaw number 2977, CAO.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So the province made some legislative amendments to allow more flexibility with the advertisement of public hearings. And this is then our bylaw coming forward to take advantage of that flexibility. So again, there are two bylaws that we need to address. The first is the public notice bylaw to adopt those amendments, and we're looking for 3 readings on that. And then the second would be the development procedure bylaw for 3 readings, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. So we'll deal with these. Anybody willing to make that motion? Moved, seconded, thank you. Discussion on it? Seeing no hands, I'll call the question. All those in favor, this is a rural vote, by the way. All those in favor, thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next one is zoning bylaw amendment in electoral area C, CAO.
This is the oversized accessory dwelling on Black Sage Road that was the subject of the public hearing this morning, Mr. Chair, and we're recommending that this now get third in adoption.
Okay, I'll go to Director Knodel.
I support the recommendation. It has no effect on the farm areas, so it would actually be an addition to the area. Thank you.
Okay, so you're moving it, seconded, great. Any discussion? Again, seeing no hands, a rural vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. That takes us down to legislative services and electoral area H noise control bylaw, CAO.
Regardless of the deferral of the previous item on the noise bylaw, Mr. Chair, that consolidation, this is the area H noise bylaw, and we're bringing forward the bylaw to repeal that. And we're recommending that this be given 3 readings and sent to the inspector.
Okay, I'll go to Director Coyne Sr.
I'd like to make the administrative recommendation, please.
Moved, seconded, great. Any discussion on this? Seeing no hands, this is a corporate vote. I will call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to CAO report. CAO, anything to report there?
Just that we have now stood down on the Carameas Creek wildfire, Mr. Chair. We have conducted our after action report internally, and we should be bringing that a final report into the board prior to the end of this session.
Okay, thank you for that. Down to other business, which is the chair's report. Nothing new to report, but I would just point out to the board that we did have MLA Rolly Russell drop into the boardroom here with us. He's observing the 4 directors that are in the room with us, while the rest of you are online. But I would just pointing that out, because if any of you did have any questions or thoughts, maybe you can get a hold of Rolly afterwards. Those of us in the boardroom will probably talk to him in person. So. Down to directors' motions. Any motions from directors? Again, seeing no hands. Board members' verbal updates. Director Obrecht, go ahead.
Yes, thank you to the chair, and thank you very much to MLA Rolly Russell for being here. I'm going to speak to something that the MLA is very familiar with, and I don't know if he saw the August 25th Penticton Herald, but if you haven't, I'll show it to you later. Almost full page issue This is Area D. This is the Vintage Views wastewater treatment plant issue. We have enforcement. I've been contacted by CBC. I've been contacted by the Herald. More media attention. Follow-up is coming. Community have brought this concern to me repeatedly. I've spoken with Chair Pendergraft. He's attended on site. I've spoken to CAO. He will recall Wednesday, April 27. I spoke about it. MLA Russell knows I met with him in Richmond on Wednesday, April 6, 2022, specific to this purpose. And again, on Wednesday, March 16, 2022, with him, Minister Conroy, and MLA. And the story goes on. And I've spoken about this at this board many times. This is urgent. Depending who you talk to, ministry says we could be facing catastrophic failure. I don't know if it's true, but if it's true, then it's urgent. We have 17 title holders right now getting damaged. I've reported to this board before. People are crying tears. I've been sworn at in 2 official languages on this issue. Some of you may know I didn't do it, and yet I get to hear all this upset. And indeed, we have an opportunity here at the local level to listen, to work with our partners. We have one in the room today from the provincial government. We need, it's our planning department that can't issue a building permit. They can't issue a building permit because of a long enforcement story. Our objectives on this are real simple. We want conversion of the utility. We have community support. You've got my support in this area. We want compliance. We want permits to issue so people can build their homes and people can have jobs and we can get something happening in this community. We've got grant money in a bank account that may qualify according to provincial staff who I've spoken to. And I would like to get a little support from the board and from staff to help us get this done, and from the province. And I do have a tour of our area set for tomorrow morning with Dan Ashton, our MLA, who is, I'm lucky I have 2 of them. I have 2 good ones, which is really lucky. And they both indicate to me concern and respect for community and willingness to do what they can. Unfortunately, sometimes they can't do much, which is not the right answer, but unfortunately we hear that too often, I think, in community, or it feels that way. I have hope on this one that something better is possible. And I see MLA Russell here nodding his head, and I know that he knows about it. I know he's aware, but I wanted to give an update to this board because this board is part of our governance in this area, and we're being impacted. Our planning department, our community, our citizens, our ratepayers, they're being affected. I was at a meeting last night, stuff I heard, I'll keep private for now. But if anybody wants to hear the private version, it's not pretty. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the update there, Director Knodel. I'll go to Director Knodel next, and Director Bush after that. Go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. I'd just like to report back on something I mentioned in the last meeting or at our last get together. I did attend the 1,000 Rides Out festival, and thank you for the donations that they got. Some of the pictures, the videos that they showed of the people that were being brought out were quite heart-wrenching. A number of orphans that were created during this. It really does break your heart when you see it. It's quite a horrible situation. But they did offer a great thank you to the community. They have now managed to increase that amount to 1.2 million and 50 cents. So it's an amazing endeavor on the part of these volunteers and an amazing output from our citizens. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you for that. Director Bush, you're next. Go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to say in our area in Costin, I'm really upset with the highways because of the road maintenance and weed control. They're going around mowing the side roads, but they're not doing any of the intersections. And I've been phoning and phoning and phoning. And I don't know, Kylie Odell, I don't even know if she's still working, but she hasn't responded to me once. I've sent notices to AIM and nothing's happening. the aspens or elms, I'm sorry, growing out in the side of the roads and the highway is just getting too much. The site, you have to pull your car right out into the highway before you can see down the road. It's just horrible and I can't understand it and I'm just disgusted. Thank you.
Hey, just so you know, Director Bush, I see MLA Rowley scribbling madly, so he's taken note. Director Gettins, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to back up Director Bush there too. In Area F, we had AIM come through for maintenance, and we have never seen anything like it either. It was so poorly done. They left a lot of the weeds laying behind. Tons of complaints around it on social media and to myself as well. So it would be great to have them come back in with the ministry, or with our representatives, our local representatives from the ministry, just so we can talk about this, because they're not meeting expectations of citizens on this type of thing in our area as well. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Director Roberts, I see you down there. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's the same. I did send in information to AIM, backing up Director Bush on that, and I did make comments about his area and mine as well, where the elms are growing in so thick into the roadway that you couldn't even pull to the side of the road. I'd be interested in finding how many of our forest fires that start on the side of roads now are because the lack of maintenance in regards to the edging and the maintaining of the or the removal of a lot of the growth. We're also seeing, even from the gravel from winter, built up so much on the side of the roads, all the hills and access to roads don't just have a skiff of gravel. Some of them have like sandbars. So I each year just seems to be worse, and this year it's Devon's, it's really bad. I'll leave the rest to my inside voice, but thank you.
Thank you. Any further updates? Seeing no hands, that brings us to the end of the meeting. So looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded, all in favor. Thank you very much. Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Wow.
We'll see most of you at UBCM. Otherwise, the next meeting. Wow. I'm gonna just